The sun sets slowly, like a gentle farewell after a long day. Its final rays fade along the horizon, leaving behind a vast expanse painted in tranquil shades of violet and blue. The city, or wherever you live, begins to fall silent. The once busy streets now echo only the sound of a lone pair of footsteps, or perhaps the soft rustle of leaves stirred by the night wind in the distance. Every sound seems to slow down, soften, dissolve into the space now being gently woven with the threads of darkness. Do you hear it? The whisper of the night. It's not loud. It's not rushed. It doesn't compete the way daytime does. Night is a moment of stillness, a time untouched by obligations, deadlines, or the frantic pace of everyday life. Night gives us permission to breathe, slowly, deeply. Night is a safe haven for weary souls. And now, in this very moment, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath. There's no need to hurry. Slowly now, a full breath in, and gently exhale. Once more, inhale through your nose, feel the cool air travel down your throat, filling your chest, and then exhale slowly as if releasing all the burdens of the day into the breeze of the night. Now let go. Let go of every worry. Let go of the thoughts that just passed through your mind. No more work. No more deadlines. No more notifications lighting up your phone. Just you and the night. Just your mind, quieting, drifting like a leaf gently floating along a still stream. And in that weightless moment, let your mind journey. Not somewhere loud, crowded, or chaotic, but on a voyage back, far, far back, into the ancient past. To a time before people existed, before the world had a name, before there was even such a thing as time or memory. A journey back to the very beginning, to the moment when the first beams of light touched a planet still barren, still frozen, still unnamed. Imagine. Billions of years ago, Earth was nothing more than a sphere of blazing rock. No grass, no blue oceans, no birdsong, no human breath. Only stone, of volcanoes, cosmic dust, and invisible waves of energy drifting through endless space. And yet, in that desolation, something miraculous happened. A particle, a single particle, smaller than a speck of dust, appeared. No one knows where it came from. It carried no language, no purpose. But it was a beginning. That first seed lay hidden deep within the earth, unseen, untouched. But inside, something stirred. A signal, a pulse, a faint whisper from the universe, as though the entire galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And then, it sprouted. Not in the way a plant sprouts, but in the sense of life's very first flicker. A tiny chain of chemical reactions began to shape what we would one day call life. It wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. There was no blinding light, no thunderous explosion. Everything unfolded slowly, like a melody played on string instruments, each note echoing softly in a concert with no audience. Over millions of years, from those invisible seeds, life slowly took root. The oceans formed. Organic molecules began to bond, not by plan, but as if guided by some invisible hand. Single-celled organisms emerged, and over the next few billion years life grew. From the microscopic to the massive. From bacteria to fungi to plants to fish to dinosaurs, and eventually to humans. To you. To me. Listening to this story in the dark. Do you see? All wonders begin in silence. In a peaceful moment like this one. Not with explosions, but with patience. With steps so slow they're imperceptible by human time. The world was born out of stillness. From a long, unobserved night. Just like how you're hearing this now, in a quiet evening when the world has gone to sleep and only you remain. With curiosity. With a yearning to understand what happened long ago in places far away. And this is only the beginning. The beginning of a long story, spanning billions of years. A story of civilizations that rose and vanished. Of people who lived, loved, and sacrificed, but were forgotten by time. A story that's waiting for you to listen. Night by night, chapter by chapter, breath by breath. From hunter-gatherer to the first seeds. Before the fields turned green and endless. Before golden wheat was harvested in thick, abundant bundles. Before the first mud brick houses rose quietly in the fertile valleys. And even before humans learned to name their homeland, to claim land with fences, blades, or language, there was a time. A time when we, the first humans, lived a nomadic life, drifting like clouds with no knowledge of tomorrow. Back then there were no maps, no borders, no cities, no nations, no land marked belonging to someone. We lived with the wind, with the forest, with the water and the first rains of the season. Every day was a new journey. Every mountain a challenge. Every stream an invitation. And every unknown land, either a place of rest, or a final farewell. That life was not easy, but it was never false. No one could deceive nature. No one could escape hunger. No one could claim more than what their own hands could carry on their back. Imagine this. You wake not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to wind rustling through the treetops. There are no warm beds or cozy blankets, only your skin meeting the cool morning air. Your bare feet touch damp earth and gravel, as the sun barely peaks above the horizon. There is no kitchen, no menu. You have to go, together with your group, into the forest searching for fruit, roots, or, with some luck, the footprints of a deer that passed in the night. Each day begins with the empty echo of hunger, and ends with the quiet hope that tomorrow there will be something to eat. That was the life of our ancestors, the hunters and gatherers. They weren't villagers. They had no addresses, no permanent belongings. Only family, small groups surviving together through trust, unity, and instinct. Adults hunted. Women and children gathered. They shared everything, because survival did not come from hoarding, but from giving. There was no concept of owning land. No idea of rich or poor. No one stored food in vaults. No one built homes bigger than the rest. Life back then followed one simple law of nature. Everything is temporary, and nothing can be held forever. Every year, when the seasons shifted, when animals migrated or fruits ran dry, they moved again, packed up their camps, took their tools, their memories, and their grief, and walked on, to another place where life could continue. That journey stretched over thousands of years, from generation to generation. No one thought of settling down. No one imagined that one day humans would plant seeds and wait for them to grow. Because waiting was a luxury prehistoric people couldn't afford. When you don't know what you'll eat tomorrow, you don't wait 3 months for rice to ripen. When you live hour by hour, on your feet with your hands and your eyes, you don't dream of abundant harvests. You just want to make it through today. Still, that life wasn't all hardship. There were peaceful moments. When the group sat around the fire, sharing stories of a tiger they once outsmarted, or the battle scar of an elder, told in slow, weathered tones that carried weight and wisdom. There was laughter. From children who caught their first frog. There was light. In the eyes of a mother watching her baby survive their first harsh winter. There was silence. When the whole group gazed at the full moon, and no one knew what to call it. They just knew it was beautiful. And everyone was quiet, as if part of a sacred ritual. Our ancestors didn't need pen and paper to record memory. They remembered through stories, through dances, through facial expressions and gestures. Every tattoo, every stone tool, every cave drawing was a story. A record that they had once lived, once fought, once loved. In that world everything was real. No social media. No selfies. No arguments about politics, religion, or ideology. Only one question mattered: how do we survive tomorrow? But within that simple life, humans began to learn great lessons. They watched nature. They noticed when the birds returned, signaling a new season. They knew when flowers bloomed, fruit would follow. They recognized which footprints belonged to deer and which to tigers. They began forming collective memory, passing it from generation to generation. And from those memories, they built something more powerful than any spear: knowledge. That knowledge wasn't written in books. It lived in memory, in a mother's lullaby, in an old man's sigh, in the cautious eyes of a young hunter entering the forest where his father once died. But do you know what's strange? Even in such harsh conditions, our ancestors survived. Not just survived, they evolved. They crafted tools. They learned to make fire. They wove rope from tree bark. They marked trails to find their way back. They figured out which plants to eat and which were poison. They mourned their dead. And perhaps they learned how to love. A love without rings or vows. Only glances, protection, and the warmth of an embrace near the fire when winter howled outside. Isn't it strange to think that we, with smartphones, high-speed internet, modern medicine, supermarkets, airplanes, spacecraft, are descendants of people who had nothing but instinct and willpower? From them, from every step across grassland, every breath behind the bushes hiding from predators, every evening when they walked on stomachs empty, every silly grin when their firstborn survived a fever, from them we were born. And though today we call ourselves civilized, modern, urban, deep within our DNA, still lives the memory of the nomads, the memory of a time when we lived with nature. No fences, no walls, no borders, just humans and the world. So, what changed? What made us, from hunters and gatherers, become farmers, then builders, then kings, then warriors, then engineers, then astronauts? What made us, from those just trying to survive today, begin to think about the future? To plant, to wait, to build, to save, and to create civilization? The answer begins with a tiny seed, a quiet decision, a moment when someone, perhaps someone just like you, stood in the middle of the wild and chose to stay. When humanity planted a dream into the earth, and then, amidst the long silent stretch of forgotten centuries, something small, almost imperceptible, began to happen. It wasn't the sound of thunder. It wasn't a blinding flash of light. There was no great milestone, no engraved tablet marking the moment. No one stood up to declare, "We are entering a new age." No, it came slowly, as gently as a single leaf falling onto damp soil at the end of the rainy season. It arrived in the silence only nature and wandering prehistoric souls could notice. At that time, humankind still lived as drifters. They followed herds of animals across lands and seasons, surviving on what the forests, rivers, and plains provided. Fruits gathered from trees, roots pulled from the earth, meat hunted from beasts, fish scooped from swelling rivers. They didn't think about tomorrow. They lived for today. They carried no burdens. They had no permanent homes. Their roof was the sky, their shelter a rocky overhang. Wherever they woke up the next morning might not be the place they'd sleep again. But then one day, maybe after a long season of rain when the earth was still soft and moist, someone noticed something odd. In the place where a few seeds had accidentally fallen, perhaps spilled from gathered wild grains, or dropped during a meal by the fire, small green shoots began to rise from the ground. No one had planted them. No one had watered them. But they had fallen, and they grew. At first it was likely nothing more than curiosity. Then it happened again. And again. Wherever seeds fell into good, damp soil and were left undisturbed, they sprouted. They didn't vanish. They didn't get washed away. They stayed. They became the very plants people once had to chase across the wilderness. And it wasn't just a sprout. It was the beginning of an idea. An idea that formed slowly in the minds of early humans, who had always followed nature, now wondering, could nature follow us instead? Why not? Why not try planting these seeds closer to where we live? Perhaps for the first time in history, humans began to imagine the future in a different way, not as something to chase but as something to grow. But in order to grow it, they had to stay. They had to form roots just like the seeds. They had to settle. No one knows the name of the first person who had this thought. There are no monuments carved in their image. No poems or legends survive to sing their praise. Perhaps it was a woman. A mother sitting by the fire, watching her child play, accidentally dropping a few seeds to the ground. Perhaps it was a child, digging curiously into the damp earth, hiding seeds in secret. Perhaps an old man, too tired to follow the tribe, stayed behind by the stream and quietly buried the last few grains in his pouch, hoping something would come of it. Whoever it was, they changed the course of history more than any king or conqueror ever would. Because in that moment, humankind began a new relationship with the land. No longer just a path to cross. No longer a place to pass through. But a home, a place that could produce life if treated with care. At first, it wasn't called agriculture. There were no names for what they were doing. They simply tried, waited, watched, and the miracle repeated itself. Over and over. The plants grew. Silently, steadily, until one day they bore fruit again. Humans began to learn patience. They learned to read the sky and guess the coming of rain. They learned to smell the soil and know when it was ready. They followed the rivers, traced underground water, and learned how to draw it to their crops. And little by little they stopped wandering. They began to build huts next to the fields. Fences made from branches. Wooden markers for their territory. They gave names to plants. Names to places. Names to the seasons of growth and harvest. And perhaps for the first time they began telling stories to their children, not of beasts they had hunted but of crops they had planted. Stories told by firelight, not of wild hunts, but of green shoots and rainy days, of droughts survived, and of the first great harvest that lasted through the winter. They stopped being wanderers. They became settlers, planters, storytellers of the land. Can you see it now? Just one small change, planting a seed where they lived, set all of humanity on a new path. If that had never happened, there would be no villages, no farming, no harvests, no cities like Babylon or Memphis, no bread, no rice, no shared meal at the family table, no sunsets over golden fields, no image of a farmer stooping under the wide sky, hands deep in the soil that gave him life. All of that started because someone chose to stay and planted a seed. We don't know for sure where it happened first. Some archaeologists believe it was around 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is now modern-day Iraq, where wild wheat and barley were first domesticated. Elsewhere along the Nile, the ancient Egyptians learned to plant grains, using the floods to enrich their fields. In the Yellow River basin of China, humans began to cultivate millet and later rice. In the Andes Mountains, indigenous peoples learned to plant potatoes and corn, even on cold, steep hillsides. And in Southeast Asia, where you and I may sit today, our ancestors shaped rice paddies, rotated crops, and learned to live with the rhythms of monsoon and sun. Every region had its own story. But they all began with the same question. Why not plant the seeds where we live? And from that moment on, humanity was no longer just a species that survived. They became a species that created life. They turned soil into food. They turned seasons into tools. They turned shelters into homes, and memories into culture. They planted roots, not just in the ground but in their identity. It was not merely an act of survival. It was the first step toward civilization. Would you like to hear what happens next? When the first villages rose from the earth. When humans learned to store food. And later, to fight to protect the land they had nurtured? Stay with us. Because this journey, from a single seed to the rise of empires, has only just begun. This was not an instant revolution. It was not something that swept across the earth in a single season, or even a single lifetime. No banners were raised. No kings were overthrown. There were no trumpet blasts, no proclamations carved in stone. There was only silence. And time. An immense, stretching silence that echoed across millennia. This was not the kind of change that people noticed while it was happening. It was slow, achingly slow. A transformation so gradual that it might have been invisible to those living through it. And yet, in hindsight, it changed everything. Long before cities, before writing, before the wheel. Long before names like Mesopotamia or Egypt were even whispers on the wind, our ancestors stood at the edge of something enormous. Something that would redefine what it meant to be human. But in that moment they couldn't have known. They were simply people, wandering, foraging, surviving. They followed the herds. They ate what the land gave. And when the seasons shifted they moved on. But somewhere, in some forgotten valley, someone noticed a pattern. Perhaps a woman saw a seed she had dropped weeks earlier sprout in the earth. Or perhaps a man, returning to the same resting spot year after year, noticed the same wild plants growing in the same places. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was curiosity. But something changed. A new idea took root. What if we didn't have to wait for nature to provide? What if we could guide it, shape it, bring it closer to us? At first, the attempts were awkward. The soil was stubborn. The seeds were inconsistent. Some would not sprout. Others would die under the harsh sun or drown in the rains. There were no books, no teachers. Every attempt was trial and error, lessons written in hunger, failure, and persistence. But failure, as it often does in the long sweep of history, taught more than success ever could. Bit by bit, generation by generation, people learned. They learned how to dig into the earth with sticks, bones, and later stones, softening the soil so the roots could breathe. They learned that some seeds grew stronger than others, that within each harvest were hidden thousands of potential futures. And so they began to select. Not consciously at first, but slowly, instinctively. The hardiest grains, the juiciest fruits, the plants that withstood both drought and flood. These became the seeds for the next season. And from these seeds, a quiet revolution unfolded. This was not the revolution of fire or steel or empire. This was the revolution of patience. To plant was to hope, to wait, to trust that the rains would come, that the soil would yield, that the sun would not burn too long, nor hide for too many days. For the first time in human history, people began to settle. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. A planted field could not follow the herds. A growing crop could not walk beside its caretaker. So they stayed. They built shelters not for the night, but for the seasons. They dug storage pits. They wove baskets. They learned to count not years but harvests. And still they waited. They waited through storms and floods. Through locusts and frost. Through every imaginable failure. Because they had seen, just once, what was possible. A single successful harvest was enough to plant belief. A belief in something more permanent. More predictable. A life not shaped entirely by the wild, but by the will of the hands that tilled the ground. This waiting was not passive. It was active, attentive, sacred. To wait for something you've planted is to participate in a partnership with time. It is to learn humility, to acknowledge that you are not in control, but you are not helpless either. They watched the clouds. They read the signs in the stars. They listened to the animals, the insects, the wind. The land became their teacher, and they, its eternal students. Over time, what began as a handful of scattered gardens became fields. Fields became farms. Farms became villages. The knowledge deepened. Techniques improved. They learned to rotate crops, to irrigate, to fertilize. They discovered which plants nourished, which healed, which could be stored through the winter. With each passing generation, the memory of wandering began to fade. Not entirely, but enough. Because something had changed in the human spirit. Where once survival had been a daily improvisation, now it was a deliberate design. We began to imagine seasons ahead, and prepare for them. We planted not only for ourselves but for our children, for the tribe, for the future. We became, in the truest sense of the word, cultivators, of land, of time, of possibility. And the seeds changed too. The plants we grew were not the same as their wild ancestors. They grew faster. Their fruits were larger. Their roots deeper. Not through magic, but through time. Through the quiet, continuous process of selection, of choosing what worked and letting go of what didn't. This was the dawn of agriculture. But it was also the dawn of memory, of record keeping, of tradition. For the first time we had something to return to. A place, a method, a season. The rhythm of life began to settle into cycles. Planting, waiting, harvesting, rest. Each cycle taught new lessons. And those lessons became stories. Stories became songs. Songs became rituals. We passed down not just tools but wisdom. We told our children when to plant by watching the moon, how to read the soil by its smell, how to save the best seeds for the next season. In the quiet of fields and the glow of firelight, humanity began to shape its identity, not as mere survivors but as creators of their own destiny. And in this act of patient creation, we unlocked something more profound than just food security. We created culture. Because to farm is to stay is to build is to gather is to share, and to share is to imagine a life greater than one's own. We invented pottery to store grain. We carved symbols to mark the passage of months. We crafted gods to explain the rains. And we looked at the earth, not as a stranger, but as a companion. Through it all, the soil waited, the seeds endured, the people watched, they failed, and tried again, and again. And in doing so, they unknowingly laid the foundation for everything that would follow. Cities, trade, science, storytelling, language, law. None of it possible without the patience to plant and wait, to fail and try again. To believe that from a single seed could grow a new way of life. So no, this was not a revolution of swords or fire. It was slower, softer, but no less powerful. It was the quiet, stubborn revolution of the seed, of the soil, of the human spirit refusing to give up in the face of uncertainty. It was a revolution built not in days but in thousands of years. And it began not with conquest but with a question, perhaps whispered by a tired traveler watching a wild grain sway in the wind. What if we could grow this ourselves? Sedentary life and seasonal rhythms. With the ability to cultivate the land, humanity took its first steps away from constant wandering. For hundreds of thousands of years before that, our ancestors had been wanderers. Moving with the seasons, chasing herds, foraging what they could from the forests, rivers, and plains. They knew the sky. They understood the language of clouds, the patterns of stars, the scent of a coming storm. But they had no place to call home. Only the earth beneath their feet, and the sky above their heads, changing with every horizon. But one day, something changed. Slowly. Quietly. Almost without notice at first. Somewhere, perhaps in a valley nestled between distant hills, or beside the gentle curve of a river, someone noticed something. That if you dropped a seed, and if the land was kind, and if the rain came when it should, something would grow. Something that could feed your family. Not just for a day, but for weeks, even months. It was a miracle, not because it was sudden or divine, but because it shifted everything. The discovery of agriculture didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a single eureka moment. It was a whisper, a question, a trial. And then, over generations, it became an understanding. The wild grasses our ancestors once plucked became wheat. The bitter fruits they once ignored became sweet. The animals they once chased began to walk beside them. And with these changes came something even more profound. For the first time in history, people stopped. They built. They stayed. They cleared a patch of land not for a single night's fire, but for many fires, season after season. They laid stones not as tools but as boundaries. They placed sticks in the earth, not as spears but as markers for where seeds would sleep. And slowly, steadily, the first settlements were born. They were small. Tiny by today's standards. A cluster of huts made from mud, straw, and wood. Smoke curling lazily from small hearths. Children playing near the riverbank. Old ones watching the sky, reading its colors like an ancient book. People rose with the sun and slept when it left. Their lives moved with the seasons, not in resistance to nature but in rhythm with it. Spring brought the planting. Summer the tending. Autumn the harvest. Winter the waiting. And through it all, a new kind of memory began to take root, not just in minds but in places. A stone placed where an ancestor had died. A tree planted the year a child was born. A song sung in the same field again and again, until the soil itself seemed to remember the melody. This was the birth of something deeper than shelter. It was the birth of belonging. You see, before this moment in history, people belonged only to the wind. Now they began to belong to the earth. To one piece of land. To a corner of sky that felt like theirs. With every season that passed, the land gave them more than food, it gave them identity. The soil under their feet was no longer just dirt, it was home. And because it was home, they defended it. They honored it. They spoke to it as if it could hear. And so villages grew. Paths formed, first just footprints in the grass, then beaten trails. A single fire became many. One family became 5. A circle of huts became a village square. But still the pace of life remained slow. Still rooted in silence. In waiting. In the quiet patience that only farmers understand. The kind that teaches you that time cannot be forced, only felt. There were no clocks, only shadows. No calendars. Only the migration of birds, the bloom of certain flowers, the taste of wind changing in early autumn. Their days began with the chirp of the first bird and ended when the stars blinked open above the fields. And at night, oh the nights! Imagine it. No engines. No sirens. No artificial light drowning out the stars. Just the crackle of a fire. The soft murmur of a river nearby. And the sounds of people, laughing, whispering, sharing stories passed from one generation to the next. This too was part of the settlement. Not just the planting of food, but the planting of stories. Because now that they had a place to return to, their words had a place to live too. Not just in the air, but in the memory of a people. And so the elders told tales. Of the sky's moods. Of creatures half remembered and half imagined. Of the great migrations before the settling. of fire stolen from the gods, of rivers that once ran backward. Children listened with eyes wide, feet dangling over earthen ledges. And even the adults, those who had tilled and harvested all day, sat quietly, letting the words wash over them as though they too needed to remember where they came from. It was in this way that the first cultures began to bloom. Not as grand monuments or written laws, but as feelings, patterns, rituals. The way a mother wrapped her child in cloth. The way a father passed down the knowledge of which star meant rain. The shape of tools. The rhythm of dance. The tone of mourning. And so, little by little, without fanfare or announcements, civilization began. But let's stay here just for a moment longer. In this early settlement. In the hush between great turning points in history. Because here is where the most essential part of our humanity was born. Here where people first planted more than seeds, they planted permanence. They marked the earth with meaning. They touched the soil not just to take from it, but to become part of it. Can you feel it? Not the drama of conquest, not the thunder of armies, but the heartbeat of a village waking up to morning light. The sound of hands brushing dew from leaves. The rustle of straw as someone turns in their sleep. The whisper of a mother humming while grinding grain. This is history too. And it is sacred. Because without these quiet beginnings, there would be no empires. No cities. No cathedrals, no pyramids, no maps. Only wandering. But thanks to that first seed, that first thought, that first decision to stay, we became more than survivors. We became settlers, creators, caretakers. And though thousands of years have passed since those first villages rose from the mud and grass, if you walk through the right valley, at the right time of day, when the wind is still and the sun is low, you might feel it. The hum of memory beneath your feet, the echo of a hand pressing into soil, the rhythm of a life once lived slowly, sweetly, in tune with the earth. And perhaps, in that moment, you will remember that the real beginnings of our world didn't come from thunder, but from silence. Not from kings, but from farmers. Not from war, but from patience. And that somewhere long ago a small group of people decided not to run anymore. They chose to plant something, and wait. And in that waiting, the world we know today was born. They learned how to read the sky, not with instruments or digital charts, but with instinct. The clouds became their calendar. The wind, their whispering advisor. The scent of the air before a rainstorm, the shift in bird calls at dawn, the color of the soil under their bare feet, all of it spoke a language they had grown to understand. These early farmers, men and women long forgotten by name, did not just survive off the land. They listened to it. They observed it with a patience that modern life has all but erased. They knew when rain was coming not because anyone told them, but because they had seen the same shade of gray in the clouds 100 times before. They could sense when the sun would return after a storm, not by checking a forecast, but by noticing the way leaves curled slightly toward the light, or how the frogs quieted just after the thunder passed. And the earth itself, its moisture, its warmth, its smell, was their guide. They knew when it was dry enough to plow, when it was damp enough to receive the seeds, when it needed rest, and when it was time to begin again. Their days were not defined by alarm clocks or busy schedules. Their rhythm was the rhythm of the soil. Plow, sow, tend, harvest, rest, repeat. This was the cycle of their lives. Not for a season, not for a few years, but for generations. They rose before dawn while the world was still cool and quiet, and they walked into the fields with tools worn smooth by their fathers' hands. The plow cut through the earth like a blade through memory, turning over layers of soil that had long rested beneath the surface. They worked in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because the land demanded their full attention. Each furrow they carved into the earth was a promise, a hope that something would grow, that their families would eat, that the next season would be kind. When the earth was ready, they placed the seeds with a kind of reverence. It wasn't just planting, it was trust. A leap of faith that the sky would weep at the right time, that the sun would shine warmly but not harshly, that life would emerge from the quiet dark beneath their feet. They knew how delicate the balance was. Too much rain and the seeds would rot. Too little and they would never sprout. Too much sun and the crops would wither before bearing fruit. Too little and the harvest would be late, if it came at all. And so they watched. Every morning, every evening. They noticed when the birds migrated earlier than usual. They watched the moon's position in the night sky. They listened to the frogs, the crickets, the wind. Even the ants, they believed, could tell them when rain was near. They were not superstitious. They were observant. They had no luxury of failure. Nature did not forgive carelessness. As the plants began to grow, their care became more intimate. They weeded with bare hands, knelt beside the fragile green shoots, spoke to them softly, sometimes even sang. Some believed the plants grew better when they were spoken to. Others simply found comfort in the quiet act of tending to life. Weeks passed. Then months. The fields slowly transformed from brown to green to gold. And when the time came, when the grains were heavy with ripeness, when the fruits were full and fragrant, they harvested. Not all at once, but patiently, carefully. Every crop had its time. Every tree its rhythm. Every vine its own secret. Harvest time was a kind of celebration, but also a reckoning. It revealed what the season had truly given, and what it had taken away. Some years brought abundance, others brought silence. But there was no time to linger in joy or despair. The earth never waited. As soon as one season ended, another began. Again they plowed. Again they sowed. Again they hoped. It was not a life of excitement or surprise. It was not glamorous, but it was real. It was honest work, grounded in dirt and sweat and sunburn and aching backs. It was humble, but it carried with it a deep, ancient dignity. These people, those whose names we will never know, shaped the world with their patience. Every field of wheat, every orchard, every vineyard, every terraced hill that clings to the side of a mountain, exists because of hands like theirs. They didn't call themselves scientists or philosophers, but in truth they were both. To grow food from the earth is to perform an experiment with no control group, no second chances, and no guarantee. To understand the seasons, to read the soil, to predict the sky, is a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught in books. It must be lived. They understood balance, though they had no word for it. They lived in harmony with forces larger than themselves. They took what they needed. They gave back what they could. They knew that if they ever tried to take more than the earth could give, there would be a price. And so they lived simply. Their days began with light and ended with darkness. Their meals were quiet. Their joy was found not in wealth, but in a row of healthy crops, in the return of the birds in spring, in the laughter of children running through tall grass. They slept well, tired not from stress but from effort. They dreamed not of luxury but of stability, of knowing that the next meal would come, that the roof would hold through the storm, that the seeds would grow again next year. And even when it didn't, even when drought or frost or flood took everything they had worked for, they didn't give up. They mourned. They grieved. But then they started over. Because that's what it meant to be a keeper of the land. To be part of a story that didn't end when things got hard. A story written not with ink, but with footprints in the dust, with calloused hands, with hearts that refused to stop hoping. Even now, echoes of their lives remain, in the traditions passed down, in the wisdom etched into songs and sayings, in the way we still look at the sky and wonder what it means. They were not heroes in the way we tell stories now. There were no battles, no kingdoms, no crowns. Only people. Watching. Waiting. Working. Planting seeds in the quiet faith that something good would come. And often it did. A single grain of wheat grew into a field. A single field fed a village. A village became a city. A city became a civilization. And so, from the patient, deliberate repetition of plowing, sowing, tending, and harvesting, our entire world began. This is where history starts. Not in war. Not in discovery. But in quiet, unseen labor. In the hands of those who rose each morning with nothing but a tool and a prayer. They are the reason we eat. The reason we gather. The reason we have the luxury to dream. And though we rarely speak their names, they are still with us. In every loaf of bread. In every seed planted. In every moment when someone, somewhere, bends down to touch the soil and listens for what it wants to say. With every passing season, wisdom grew quietly among them. They didn't rush. They didn't chase after change for the sake of novelty. Instead, their learning came through rhythm, through repetition, through simply being present, day after day beneath the sky and among the earth. Each harvest left behind more than just grain in storage or fruit in baskets. It left behind knowledge, silent, accumulated experience, etched into calloused hands and sun-lined faces. The people watched how the rains came, sometimes early, sometimes not at all. They noticed the way the wind shifted before the weather turned. They learned how certain shadows fell longer in certain months, and how the birds grew restless when the cold began to stir in the soil. These were not lessons taught in classrooms or scribed into scrolls. They were learned through dirt and blisters, through the ache of muscles and the joy of abundance. Every mistake became a teacher. Every successful crop became a celebration, not just of survival but of understanding. Year by year they began to see patterns, cycles, invisible pulses that governed the life of the land. In the beginning their tools were crude, nothing more than sharpened stones tied to wooden handles, woven baskets to carry what the earth gave. But necessity sparked creativity. And creativity, nurtured by patience and quiet observation, led to subtle revolutions. The tools began to change. First, someone noticed that a longer handle gave more leverage when tilling the soil. Then another realized that stone edges dulled quickly but flint, if chipped just right, held its bite longer. As generations passed, bones were shaped into needles, sticks were bent into plows, and metal, once rare and mysterious, became part of their daily rhythm. Yet these inventions did not explode into existence like lightning from the sky. They emerged slowly, almost invisibly, over time. The hoe was refined bit by bit. The sickle curved just a little more to fit the angle of the wrist. The irrigation ditch grew straighter, wider, deeper, season by season, as they learned to read the flow of water like a second language. There were no blueprints. Only memory. And memory, passed from elder to child, became tradition. With every improvement, however small, life grew a little easier, a little more abundant. But the heart of their world remained unchanged, the field. The field was more than a patch of cultivated earth. It was the center of everything. It was where stories were told, between planting and weeding. Where friendships were deepened, not through grand words, but through the simple act of working side by side. Where silence became a kind of communication in itself, the kind that comes only from shared purpose and quiet understanding. Children ran barefoot between rows of seedlings. Lovers exchanged glances beneath the low sun while harvesting under golden skies. The old sat at the edge, watching with eyes that had seen the cycle repeat more times than they could count, their hands resting on knees worn from decades of kneeling in that same soil. The field was where sorrow was brought, when food was scarce or when illness claimed someone too soon. But it was also where hope returned, every spring as the first green shoots broke through the frost-hardened ground. Life here didn't come in explosions. It came in seasons. Time was marked not by clocks or calendars, but by the smell of wet earth in March, the hum of insects in June, the rustle of drying leaves in September. They moved with nature, not against it. There was no race, no competition, only a sacred rhythm that had always been and would always be. Even the animals seemed to understand. Birds built nests along the edge of the plots, knowing they would not be disturbed. Oxen and horses were more than labor. They were companions, their breaths misting in the morning air, their weight shared across generations. Dogs watched over children. Cats kept the granaries free of pests. The whole ecosystem, plants, animals, humans, was interwoven into a single breath, a single heartbeat. This was not a quiet born of emptiness, but of deep-rooted fullness. To an outsider it might have looked uneventful. Days passed slowly. Conversations were unhurried. No one shouted to be heard. But beneath that calm exterior pulsed a profound vitality. The people here lived in every moment. They were present, not distracted by what might come, not obsessed with what had been. Their joys were simple but complete. A perfectly round squash, the first egg of spring, the laughter of a child running home with dirt under their nails. And perhaps most remarkable of all, no one kept score. There was no contest to see who harvested most. No tally of who contributed more or less. They worked because work was life and life meant belonging. The field belonged to everyone. And in turn everyone belonged to the field. The elders were the keepers of memory, not just agricultural memory but emotional memory. They remembered which year the frost came late. They remembered the song sung when the first furrow was carved each spring. They remembered who had planted the tallest corn, who had wept with joy at the sight of a full root cellar after years of drought. They passed these memories on, not in long lectures but in side comments, in bedtime tales, in the way they handed a child a tool, not with instructions but with trust. And so the rhythm continued. Children became youths. Youths grew into parents. Parents aged into elders. Elders became memories. And through it all the tools changed ever so slightly. The rows became straighter. The seeds more reliable. But the pace remained. Slow. Sacred. Sustained. There was beauty in the repetition. In knowing that what you planted today would feed not only your children but their children. In knowing that the work of your hands was part of a story that stretched back before your birth, and would continue long after your name was forgotten. Because in this world, it wasn't about leaving your mark. It was about tending the mark left by others. It was about continuing what had been trusted to you. The field didn't belong to any one person. It belonged to time, to the earth, and the people were its stewards. And in that stewardship, they found meaning. Not the kind of meaning scribbled into books or shouted from podiums, but the kind that hums quietly in your bones when the sun rises and you know your place in the world. Each season was a teacher. Spring whispered, "Begin again." Summer sang, "Grow." Autumn urged, "Gather." Winter reminded me, "Rest. Reflect. Prepare." And in that endless cycle the people became not just survivors, but sages. Sages of soil. Sages of sun and water. Sages of community and care. Though no monuments were built, no histories recorded in ink, something greater remained, a way of life. A life not built on speed but on rhythm. Not on wealth but on connection. And so, season after season they walked out to the field. Tools in hand, heart steady, souls listening. To the whisper of the earth beneath their feet. To the wind moving through the wheat. To the distant call of the sky reminding them that though the world might one day change, the field remembers. the legacy of seeds and peaceful sleep. Certainly. Below is an expanded and detailed rewrite of the passage you provided, extending well beyond 2,200 words in English, while preserving the original meaning and tone. This expanded passage explores the idea of those tiny seeds as the very foundation of life and civilization, their profound influence on humanity's development, society, and worldview, all unfolding gradually, patiently. The tiny seeds that first appeared in the early days of our planet were far more than mere particles drifting aimlessly through the void. These minuscule origins of life carried within them the very essence of existence, not only for the living creatures that would eventually roam the earth but ultimately for us, humans. Those infinitesimal beginnings were the silent architects of everything that would come to define human life and the complex societies we live in today. These small seeds nurtured not just physical survival, but the slow, delicate unfolding of civilization itself. They were the unseen threads weaving together the tapestry of humanity's collective story, an unhurried narrative stretching across millennia, patiently evolving, quietly shaping the way we inhabit the world, relate to one another, and understand our place in the cosmos. To grasp the magnitude of their influence, we must first appreciate the profound journey from that initial spark of life to the sprawling networks of cities, cultures, and ideas that define modern human existence. It is a journey that spans billions of years, a journey marked not by sudden leaps or explosive breakthroughs, but by patient, incremental growth. Each step forward, no matter how small, built upon the last, laying foundation stones upon which new realities would rise. The seeds of life, beyond survival. At the beginning, those tiny seeds were simply chemical reactions, the merging of molecules under the right conditions. But over time they became something far greater than mere survival mechanisms. They birthed the first simple cells, single-celled organisms that adapted, multiplied, and diversified. Through countless generations, these cells learned to cooperate, to specialize, and to combine in new forms. From the microscopic to the macroscopic, life's gradual complexity began to emerge. Multicellular organisms took shape, giving rise to plants that could harness sunlight, animals that moved with purpose, and ecosystems where life thrived in delicate balance. These developments, seemingly small and slow on a cosmic scale, set the stage for a new chapter in Earth's history, the rise of intelligent life. This slow dance of evolution, without urgency or spectacle, was the quiet groundwork for the human species, who would one day stand at the peak of this biological pyramid. But life alone was not enough. These seeds also nurtured something even more profound: the seeds of consciousness, of culture, and of civilization. Civilization, the slow unfolding of human society. Civilization is not an invention that sprung forth overnight. It is a careful construction built layer by layer, generation by generation. The tiny seeds of life gave rise to humanity, but the seeds of civilization grew out of human experiences, our need to communicate, to cooperate, and to create meaning together. Consider the earliest human settlements, small groups that gathered for safety, for food, and for warmth. These were simple communities, yet within them lay the seeds of social order. Shared language emerged, allowing knowledge to pass from one individual to the next, and from one generation to another. Cooperation grew from necessity, and with cooperation came the early rules, the customs, and the rituals that began to define group identity. Over thousands of years, these modest villages expanded, evolved into towns, and eventually flourished into cities, the cradles of culture and power. Farming transformed societies, enabling stable food supplies and population growth. Trade routes connected distant peoples, exchanging goods and ideas. In these exchanges, the seeds of philosophy, art, and technology began to sprout. Each step forward was a slow, deliberate process, cultivated by patient hands and minds who understood that building something lasting requires time, resilience, and vision. The seeds planted by our ancestors were nurtured carefully, watered by experience, and shielded from destruction by the perseverance of those who came after. How these seeds shaped our worldview. The way we see the world today is deeply rooted in the long history seeded by those early origins. Our cultures, beliefs, and systems of knowledge evolved alongside the slow growth of civilization. The stories we tell ourselves, about where we come from, what it means to be human, and how we relate to the universe, are all branches growing from the original seed. Every philosophy, religion, and scientific discovery represents a new shoot in this sprawling tree of human understanding. The ancient rituals that connected people to the earth and the cosmos grew into complex theological systems. The curiosity that drove early humans to observe the stars and the seasons laid the groundwork for the sciences we know today. In this way, the tiny seeds of life were not just biological phenomena but also the starting points of humanity's quest for meaning. Our ability to reflect, to imagine, and to dream emerged as an extension of those first steps, taking root slowly over countless years of trial and error. The slow, patient rhythm of growth. One of the most remarkable things about this entire process is its lack of haste. In a world dominated by instant gratification and rapid change, it can be difficult to appreciate just how gradual and measured the unfolding of life and civilization truly is. The seeds of life and society grow in rhythms dictated not by urgency but by natural cycles. The seasons, the geological epochs, the gradual mutations passed through DNA. Each evolutionary leap, each cultural innovation, was the result of countless small adaptations, barely perceptible if observed in isolation, yet monumental when viewed across the vast expanse of time. It is a process that teaches us patience, not just in the biological or historical sense, but in our personal lives as well. The towering trees we admire were once tiny seeds, buried deep in soil, nurtured over years before they reached for the sky. So too, the complex structures of society and the depths of human knowledge are built on the quiet persistence of countless small moments. From seeds to society, how these beginnings define us today. The influence of those original seeds reaches into every corner of our modern world. The ways we organize ourselves socially, our laws, our governments, our economies, all echo the slow evolution of cooperation that began in prehistoric times. Even our daily lives bear the imprint of this ancient progression. The values we hold dear, community, knowledge, creativity, are fruits of a process that took millennia to cultivate. The cities where millions live, the technologies that connect us, and the art that moves us are all extensions of that first tiny spark. Understanding this can deepen our appreciation for the fragile yet enduring web of life and culture we inhabit. It reminds us that great achievements are rarely sudden or isolated. They are the results of patient effort, passed down from generation to generation, like a carefully tended garden. The legacy and responsibility of these seeds. Recognizing that we stand on the shoulders of countless small beginnings also brings a sense of responsibility. We are the current stewards of this grand legacy, a legacy that demands care and respect. How we choose to live today will shape the seeds planted for tomorrow's generations. Will we nurture the growth of understanding, compassion, and creativity? Or will we neglect these precious beginnings, allowing them to wither in haste and neglect? The slow, deliberate unfolding of life and civilization reminds us that meaningful change takes time. It calls us to be patient gardeners of our own futures, tending carefully to the seeds we plant, both in the soil of our environment and in the hearts of those who will come after us. A reflection on time and progress. In a world that often celebrates speed, This slow evolution of life and society offers a powerful counterpoint. It invites us to slow down, to reflect, and to reconnect with the deeper rhythms that have always guided human progress. We are part of a story that began billions of years ago, not with noise and haste but with silence and patience. That story continues today in the small choices we make, the ideas we share, and the communities we build. The tiny seeds that started it all are still with us, in the cells of our bodies, in the traditions we honor, and in the dreams we pursue. They remind us that from the smallest beginnings, the greatest journeys emerge. From wild grains to golden fields, the timeless tale of agriculture. It began with something so small, so unremarkable, and yet destined to change the fate of humanity. A single wild stalk of wheat, growing untamed in the sun-baked valleys of ancient Mesopotamia, rustling softly in the morning breeze, long before history was ever written down. In those earliest days, before cities rose, before empires fell, before names were even etched in stone, humans were wanderers, moving with the seasons, chasing herds, gathering roots, and living at the mercy of nature. The earth was a wild tapestry of danger and bounty. Yet somewhere in this untamed world, someone, perhaps a woman tending her family's fire, or a child playing at the edge of a clearing, noticed that the seeds they had once gathered and discarded were beginning to grow. And from that moment, everything changed. The story of agriculture begins not with a grand invention, not with thunderous declarations or triumphs sung by poets, but with patience, quiet observation, and hope. The first farmers were not kings or scholars. They were ordinary people who dared to place their trust in the soil. They bent their backs to dig and sow, not knowing if their work would yield food or failure. They studied the seasons. They learned the rhythm of rainfall and the language of the wind. Over time they began to understand that the land, if treated with care, could become more than a provider, could become a partner. Each generation passed down lessons carved not into scrolls but into the muscle and memory of their hands. They bred stronger grains from weaker ones. They learned to coax life from stubborn earth. Where once there was only wild grass, there now stood golden fields heavy with promise. These were the first steps. Steps that would echo across centuries. In every culture, agriculture became the foundation of society. From the Nile's sacred floodplains to the terraced hillsides of the Andes, from China's river valleys to Africa's savannas, the bond between people and land grew deeper. Not just in utility but in spirit. The land gave food, and people gave it reverence. It shaped their gods, their rituals, their calendars. It shaped their art, their stories, their very sense of time. A harvest wasn't just a measure of labor. It was a celebration of life's delicate balance. And in every corner of the globe, farmers rose before the sun, walked out into dew-covered fields and began again. Year after year, century after century. They endured droughts that cracked the earth, storms that shattered hope, invasions, wars, plagues, and every hardship history could throw at them. Yet they kept planting, keep believing in tomorrow. Because agriculture is not merely a system of food production. It is the most enduring expression of trust. To place a seed in the ground is to believe in the unseen. To labor through heat, cold, and rain for a harvest that might never come. That is faith. That is patience. That is the soul of humanity. And as knowledge grew, so did the fields. Tools evolved from sharpened sticks to plows drawn by oxen. Then to iron, to steel, and eventually to machines that could harvest in minutes what once took weeks. Entire civilizations flourished because of agriculture. And just as often, entire civilizations crumbled when they failed to honor it. But even as we moved from hand tools to satellite-guided tractors, from crop rotation to hydroponics and vertical farming, The essence of the story remains unchanged. The seed, the soil, the sun, and the soul is willing to wait. Modern agriculture, with its sprawling fields that stretch beyond the horizon, its towering silos and its roaring combines, may appear to have little in common with that first wild wheat. But beneath the surface of every farm, no matter how advanced, lies the same timeless relationship. Human and earth, bound together in a quiet, enduring dance. We have come so far. From sowing by hand to genetic engineering. From relying on seasonal rains to creating artificial irrigation systems that mimic the rhythm of nature. From feeding a single village to feeding entire nations. Yet for all the progress, the work remains deeply human. There is still a person who watches the weather, who walks the rows of crops, who wipes the sweat from their brow and prays for a good harvest. There is still a farmer who wakes before dawn, who battles weeds and pests and price drops, who wonders if this year will be better than the last. And there is still silence in the fields, a silence full of stories, full of waiting. Because agriculture has never been about instant results. It's a long game, a lifelong journey. It teaches us patience and humility, because no matter how skilled we become, we are still not in control. We plant, we water, we nurture, but we cannot command the clouds. We cannot demand that the sun shine or the frost hold off just one more night. We must wait, and hope, and trust. In that way, the story of agriculture is the story of us all. We too plant seeds in life, seeds of dreams, of effort, of love. We do not always see immediate results. But we press on, because something deep within us believes that effort will bloom, that time will bring fruit, that good things grow slowly, and like the farmer we are shaped by the act of waiting. We become who we are not in the moments of harvest, but in the long, quiet seasons in between. And so, from those first fragile grains plucked from wild grass, to today's vast, humming landscapes of cultivated land, the tale of agriculture stretches on like a river through time, a tale without a true beginning, and one that may never truly end, because as long as we walk this earth, as long as we hunger, as long as we hope, there will be those who answer the quiet call of the land, those who kneel in soil are still wet with morning dew, and place a seed in the earth, and believe. This story is not one of noise or chaos, not of conquest or destruction. It is quiet, steady, and deeply peaceful. It is the rhythm of the seasons, the heartbeat of the land. It is a symphony not played with instruments, but with time, labor, and trust. A timeless epic etched not in stone or ink, but in furrows, in roots, in every grain of harvested wheat. It is the story of patience, of our connection to the soil beneath our feet, and the unseen future held in the palm of a farmer's hand. Title: Seeds of Time, A Journey Through Quiet Transformations. And now, as you sit here, listening to the story that's about to unfold, a story of time not told in grand battles or famous names, but in whispers, in quiet corners of history, in the gentle falling of leaves that no one noticed, and the silent stretching of roots beneath ancient soil. I invite you to close your eyes, if you can, or if not, simply turn your thoughts inward, slow your breathing, and allow the noise of the modern world to soften. Let the urgency of clocks, the pressure of unfinished tasks, the glare of screens and the ache of worry, fade, just for a little while. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story from the past. It's a seed planted long ago, one that may still be growing within you today, though you may not have known it. These are the seeds of time, planted in forgotten soil, watered by memory, and warmed by the quiet gaze of those who came before us. They are not loud, they are not proud, but they are real. They shaped lives, changed destinies, altered the flow of rivers and the rhythm of hearts. But they did so slowly, silently, deliberately. So now, as you journey with me into the places memory tends to forget, let your mind descend, not into darkness, but into stillness. The kind of stillness you might find beneath the surface of a pond, where light still reaches but sound does not disturb, where things grow at their own pace, unhurried, unafraid. Breathe in, and let it all settle, like dust that's been swirling for too long, finally finding a place to rest. Let your thoughts, your worries, your busyness, take a seat by the door. They are not banished, only waiting. Because right now we're going somewhere they cannot follow. We're stepping into a time before the present rushed in, before change became loud and chaotic, before history was turned into headlines and hashtags. We are stepping into the time of seeds, the moments that felt small, but became mighty, the decisions whispered in candlelit rooms, the letters never sent but deeply felt, the hands that tilled soil while praying silently for rain. This is not just history. It is humanity. It is the slowness we've forgotten how to hold, the patience we've traded for convenience, the reverence we've replaced with urgency. And in the heart of it is peace. The kind of peace that only comes from looking back with gentle eyes, not to judge or correct, but to understand. To trace the roots of who we are, to see where we come from, to honor those whose stories were never sung, whose names don't appear in textbooks, but whose footsteps carved the ground we now walk upon. These are the seeds, and this is their time to speak again. But only if you're quiet enough to hear them, only if you're still enough to feel them. So now, as we begin, let go of what you thought this would be. Let go of expectations and definitions. You don't need to learn anything. You don't need to know what happens next. You don't even need to remember it all when it's over. Because this is not a lecture. It's not a list of dates and facts. It's a walk, a slow one, through long-forgotten meadows of memory, where the past isn't behind us, but all around us, where time doesn't march. It lingers. It hums, it sighs, so let it. Let the rhythm of this story slow your own heartbeat. Let the voice you're hearing now be a kind of lantern, guiding you through the fog of what's gone. Because sometimes, the most profound transformations are not born in war rooms or revolutions, but in the stillness between two ordinary moments, when someone chooses to plant a seed, instead of walk away. And those are the moments we're here to rediscover. They won't shout. They won't demand. They will simply be. And you, if you're willing, can sit beside them and listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. So take a breath, a real one, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and as the air settles, let yourself drift backward, not in time but in rhythm, back to a way of being that modern life has buried, back to the roots, back to the soil, back to the beginning, because it's there, in the quiet, in the calm, in the peace we so rarely permit ourselves to feel, that these stories live. And now, let's begin. A journey into rest, when history sleeps. The stories of history have finally come to an end for tonight. Their pages slowly close, one by one, like the gentle turning of leaves in the breeze. Each tale, each voice, each echo of the past, now whispers into silence. The battles are over. The kings and queens have retired to the shadows of time. The dusty roads once walked by soldiers and sages have grown quiet. The laughter of ancient cities, once vibrant and full of life, now fades into a soft, distant hum. And here you are, alone with the silence of the present, wrapped in the stillness of this moment, and everything begins to settle. Thoughts, worries, to-do lists, questions. They float, weightless. They begin to lose shape, to dissolve into the air around you. You don't need them now. Not here. Not in this sacred space between waking and dreaming. Let them go. Like fallen petals drifting on the surface of a quiet river. Let them move away from you. Slowly, gently. With no resistance. With no need to hold on. Because the night is calling. Softly, kindly. And sleep is drawing near. Your body knows it. Feel the warmth gathering in your chest. Feel the softness pressing gently into your bed. The way your hands relax without you asking them to. The way your shoulders begin to sink. The way your eyelids grow heavier and heavier. You are safe now. You are home. You are exactly where you need to be. Take a deep breath. Inhale slowly through your nose and feel that breath. Let it fill your lungs like cool morning air in an ancient forest. Hold it just for a moment. And now, exhale. Slowly, gently. Let it all go. Breathe again. A little slower this time. A little deeper. And with each breath, let yourself fall just a little bit more. Into the softness of the night. Imagine now that you are lying under a sky of stars. Ishtar a memory. Each one a quiet guardian, watching over you. The moon shines softly above. Not too bright. Just enough to light the edges of your dreams. You feel no rush. No demand. No noise. Only the gentle rhythm of your breath. And the heartbeat of sleep calling you, soothing you, embracing you. The stories may have ended, but something deeper continues on. Something older than time. More peaceful than silence. A space where you are held. Without expectation. Without judgment. Just presence. Just peace. And now, as your thoughts grow quiet, as your breath evens out, and your body relaxes even more, let yourself begin to drift. Drift into a world that belongs only to you, where the past holds no weight, and the future asks nothing of you. A world of dreams, where anything is possible, where the edges of reality blur into soft clouds, where kindness lives in every corner, and wonder waits just beyond the next horizon. You are the dreamer now, and this moment is your doorway. Let's walk through it together. Close your eyes, gently now. There's no need to resist. Let your lashes fall like the curtains on a stage. The play is over. And now, it's time to rest. Let your mind take you to a place of safety. Maybe it's a cottage in the woods, with firelight flickering on wooden walls, and the sound of gentle rain tapping on the windows. Or perhaps it's a quiet meadow, where the wind moves like a lullaby through tall grass, where butterflies dance, and the scent of lavender lingers in the air. Wherever your heart leads you, follow it. Without fear, without hesitation. There is no right or wrong way to dream. Only your way. Only this peace. And as you settle deeper, as your thoughts grow slower, like waves gently touching the shore, you begin to feel it, that sweet surrender, that soft descent into sleep. Nothing needs your attention now. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be solved. This is your time. To let go, to recharge, to heal. You've done enough today. You've carried enough. And now, it's your turn to be carried. By the gentle arms of the night. Feel the stillness around you. And the stillness within you. Like the center of a calm ocean. Where everything is quiet. Where everything is safe. You may hear the distant hum of the world. But it can't reach you here. Not in this sacred place of rest. Not while you float gently, weightlessly, into your dreams. The body knows how to sleep. The heart knows how to rest. And the soul knows how to dream. So don't try. Just allow. Allow yourself to let go. To trust in the night. To believe in the power of rest. And as you drift further, imagine yourself surrounded by soft light. A glow that wraps around you like the arms of someone who truly cares, who expects nothing, who needs nothing, except to see you find peace. Sleep is a gift, and it is yours now, freely given, lovingly offered. Let yourself receive it. Let it wash over you, like warm water, like soft music, like a promise that everything will be okay. Tomorrow will wait. Morning will come when it's ready. But for now, this moment is yours. Let go of time. Let go of thought. Let go of effort. And just be. Be still. Be quiet. Be at peace. There is no need to listen anymore. No need to stay awake. Only rest. Only dreams. Only sleep. So, take one last deep breath. Fill your chest with calm. And exhale all the weight of the day. Now let your breathing be soft, natural, unnoticed. The stories of history are behind you. Their lessons gently absorbed. Their voices tucked away. Until next time, you are free now. Free to wander the landscapes of your own mind. Free to swim through the rivers of your imagination. Free to simply rest. Let the hush of night carry you. Let the softness of your pillow cradle you. Let the warmth of your blanket hold you like a gentle embrace. And as your consciousness fades, as the last tendrils of thought slip away, there is only this breath, this moment, this peace. Sleep is very close now, closer than a whisper, closer than a dream. So go ahead, let yourself go, and fall, softly, completely, into a sweet, sweet dream. Good night, sleep well, and may peace be with you, until the morning light.